What's up, Taiwan? I'm Eric Gao, coming to you from Taipei with the latest news. Taipei and New Taipei are set to tighten the monitoring of nannies and the groups that hire them. That's after an infant died after it being placed with an abusive caregiver. John Van Trieste has details.
It's been 3 months since a 1-year-old boy called Kai Kai, who was set to be put up for adoption, died from abuse by his nanny. But shock over his death isn't going away. The NGO handling his adoption is facing public anger. Its board members have held a press conference to apologize, and they hope to clear their organization of blame.
这个保姆之前跟我们契约照顾的前面的一个孩子还算正常，所以才会第二个社工人员没有办法有事先警觉，非常的内疚。
The organization says checkups in the first 3 months went smoothly, making the child's death in the 4th month a surprise. But the facts of the case are still in dispute. In addition to the nanny, a social worker is facing charges of falsifying documents and negligent homicide. The boy's family says the social worker brushed aside photos showing bruises on his head and missing teeth, with the social worker reporting that he had fallen in the park and ground his teeth too much. And the organization's response to the case, that it is only responsible for adoptions and not managing caregivers, has upset some people, including politicians.
这个说法我们没有办法接受，把安置的责任转介给本案失孕的保姆，这个保姆是由他们来选择的，责任是无法免除的。尤其在这个需要做定期的访视过程当中，他们做了没有？
Taipei Mayor Jiang Wan-an has weighed in on Facebook, saying the city should check up on children under nanny's care at least 6 times a year. Already, it seems the city government is planning to go even further.
委管办理收出养的单位应该要去强化它的访视的一个频率我们建议是1个月至少2次。那至于保姆端的一个县市的主管机关，原来每3个月1次的一个访视，我们会增加为每个月至少1次。
Similar rule changes are in the works in neighboring New Taipei as well.
社会局和社福中心将全力陪伴家属，提供所需的协助。针对社会局服务中的儿童，将会增加访视频率。
When this will start and what it means for social workers is unclear. But 3 months after a death that shocked Taiwan, change in some form is coming. Ryan Wu and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Activists in Taiwan are calling on the country's lawmakers to craft rules to better protect citizens from police brutality. Rick Lau reports from the legislature.
More needs to be done to protect people here in Taiwan from police violence. That's the message from civil society groups protesting here outside the Legislative Yuan in Taiwan's capital, Taipei. It comes after 2 high-profile incidents of police brutality in recent weeks. One in which a 17-year-old says he was beaten and tasered by police during an interrogation, and another in which a suspected scooter thief died after allegedly being hit by a police baton.
那现在呢，就是台湾也没有一个独立的酷刑调查机制，由第三方的机关来做调查。因此，这个酷刑发生在警察或者在警局，或者是说在监所内的时候，因为是一个封闭的环境，很难取得证据。
Incidents like this are rare in Taiwan, but the groups here say that they're on the rise. They're urging Taiwan to pass a law promising to adhere to the United Nations Conventions on Preventing Torture. A draft law is currently stuck in the legislature, and they say that these recent violent incidents are proof that action must be taken now. Eason Chen and Rick Lauert in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's premier says there are no plans to allow absentee voting despite opposition lawmakers' efforts to update the rules.
要做不在籍投票，我们需要在选务的加强，以及呢如何达成选举的秘密性，而且正确性跟公平性都需要来研议哈。所以目前行政院并没有这方面的规划。
Taiwan mandates in-person voting in people's registered hometowns. Opposition leaders say this makes voting difficult for Taiwanese living abroad or away from home. But ruling party lawmakers argue that without systems in place to validate votes, absentee voting could risk foreign interference, particularly from China, and thus undermine Taiwan's democracy. A man has been arrested for allegedly threatening to behead President Tsai. The 26-year-old made the threat in an online post the day before January's elections. Police say the man used a VPN to try and hide his location, setting his IP address to the United States to avoid being tracked. Online threats against high-profile politicians have been growing here in Taiwan, with recent bomb threats made against lawmakers. Taiwan's defense minister says rocket powder made by China has been found in some of Taiwan's missiles. Jaime Okan reports on how it's not just the weapons, but every part that goes into them that's coming under scrutiny.
Missiles like these are some of the most important in Taiwan's arsenal. They help defend against Chinese warships and military aircraft operating around the country, as China continues its threats to take over Taiwan. But the country's defense minister has confirmed rumors that rocket fuel powder used in some of Taiwan's domestically made missiles was purchased from China. Using weapon components supplied by an adversary is not allowed, and the defense minister says the military is handling the situation.
违背的话就要做一个处理。那我们曾经有发生过起见啊，但我要跟各位报都主动发觉的，在这过滤当中也发觉不对了，主动办理要退货要赔偿啊，这都照这个计划来做。
But the source of the rocket fuel powder is not the only problem. Taiwan's largest weapons maker, the Zhongshan Institute, says an inspection found some of the powder purchased also did not pass the required standards. If defective powder is used in these weapons, it could affect how fast and far Taiwan's missiles fly, potentially putting the country's defense in jeopardy.
发射这些飞弹火箭的时候，推力就受到影响，当然就达不到设计的性能，很可能就是在射程会受到影响。如果说里面有太多的金属粉末或者是颗粒杂质的话，那么第一个可能会引发就是爆炸疑虑。
The Zhongshan Institute says it is returning all substandard powder and terminating its contracts with the suppliers. This isn't the first time that Chinese components have been purchased or used in Taiwanese weapons. In 2022, imported electrical parts for Taiwan's Skybow missiles were also sourced by a subcontractor from China, leading to concerns that the defense system could be affected. Since then, the Zhongshan Institute says it's building stronger relationships with suppliers to prevent these incidents from happening. Taiwan's defense minister says those involved in the weapons-making process should work more closely together.
不要隐喻的就这个哎，我打脸谁或谁打脸我。我想部会之间的合作是很密切的，而且协调各方面都很顺畅的。
As Taiwan continues to push for domestically made weapons, the hope is that all parts of its missiles can be made without sourcing from China. Justin Wu and Jaime Okan for TaiwanPlus.
A Japanese rocket went up in flames just seconds after liftoff, dashing its developers' hopes of becoming the country's first private firm to put a satellite in orbit. The 23-ton rocket, dubbed Kairos, was built by Tokyo-based startup Space One, which aimed to shift satellite launches into the private sector. The rocket was carrying a mock-up of a government spy satellite that could take over for ones currently in orbit in case they fail. It marks a major setback for Japan's space aspirations. A UN-backed plan to deploy Kenyan police officers to Haiti is now on hold. Kenya had volunteered to lead the multinational security deployment last July, but it faced delays and legal barriers. Kenyan officials have decided to pause the mission after Haitian Prime Minister Ariel Henry announced his resignation. Henry has been unable to return to Haiti since signing the deal in Kenya because of escalating gang violence. The deployment is on pause until there's new leadership in Haiti. Donald Trump and Joe Biden are set for a rematch in this year's U.S. presidential election. President Biden and his predecessor have both secured enough delegates to become their party's candidates on November 5th. It's a tricky matchup, with polls showing voters unenthusiastic about either candidate. Trump, a Republican, is facing multiple prosecutions, including over his involvement in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Meanwhile, Biden, a Democrat, he's being criticized over his age, support for Israel, and his government's handling of immigration. A nonprofit group has launched the world's largest methane tracker satellite into space.
3, 2, 1, ignition.
The Environmental Defense Fund designed the satellite to orbit the Earth every hour and a half to track methane, which traps more heat than other greenhouse gases. Now, unlike other methane trackers, the group says that they will be completely transparent, making their data free to the public. They say this will help companies and countries decide who they buy gas from and will help hold stakeholders accountable.
This is a whole new game. It really creates an enormous leap forward in our ability to really understand greenhouse gas emissions.
Residents of a city in western Japan are being warned not to touch a yellow cat that may have fallen into a vat of toxic chemicals. The Fukuyama city government is searching for the cat after it was spotted on security footage sprinting out of a factory. Workers also discovered paw prints around the factory floor. Officials say the highly acidic chemicals can cause lung cancer if inhaled. They're asking people to report any sightings to the police, but they say the cat may already be dead. Environmental groups and scientists are calling on the UN to expand protections for the Galapagos Islands. Bryn Thomas has this story.
British naturalist Charles Darwin said the Galapagos Islands were a little world within itself. The Ecuadorian archipelago off the coast of South America is home to 3,000 marine species, including sea turtles, hammerhead sharks, sea lions, and marine iguanas. In 1998, UNESCO designated the islands and their surrounding waters a World Heritage Site, protecting their ecosystem and creating one of the world's largest marine reserves. But just outside its boundaries, industrial fishing fleets operate as usual. Scientists say they pose a threat to animals whose migration takes them beyond the reserve's borders.
So it's hugely important that we protect areas where we have irreplaceable biological diversity, like places like Galapagos. But that means very little if we don't also consider how these areas are ecologically connected.
Environmental activists are teaming up with scientists to demonstrate these connections using DNA testing in and around Galapagos waters.
Los análisis de estas muestras nos permiten saber qué especies marinas han estado en esta área y han dejado algún tipo de rastro de ADN que va a ser identificado y amplificado mediante técnicas de biología molecular.
Bit by bit, they've been able to map a larger and more interlinked ecosystem that stretches far beyond the borders of the Galapagos Reserve.
The information which we're collecting now is kind of like putting together a big jigsaw puzzle, because everything is integrated in some way. And if you're looking to prioritize the most important regions to start working, to know where those corridors are, you need to use genetics. So you can start to look at how particular populations are connected from one region to another using genetic analysis, genetic tools.
To protect these ecosystems, environmental group Greenpeace is calling on the UN to expand conservation around the islands using the High Seas Treaty. The UN treaty went into effect in June 2023. Once it's ratified by 60 countries, it could expand conservation areas to international waters that make up 60% of the world's oceans. This would allow for much larger nature reserves in waters outside of any country's jurisdiction. Greenpeace says Ecuador, Panama, Colombia, and Costa Rica have done much to protect the oceans within their jurisdiction, but the group is urging these countries to show leadership and ratify the agreement.
Necesitamos que por lo menos 60 gobiernos lo ratifiquen para que en esta conferencia de la ONU que se llevará a cabo en Francia en junio del 2025 se pueda ratificar y entrar en vigor. Al mismo tiempo, sabemos que no podemos esperar. Tenemos la meta de que el 30% de los océanos sean protegidos para el 2030.
30% by 2030 may be chasing the horizon. Right now, just 3% of the world's oceans are conserved, and only 2 countries, Palau and Chile, have ratified the High Seas Treaty. Whether protections will be extended to the world, or even a little world within itself, remains unclear. Luffy Lee and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
More than 100 new ocean species have been found in the waters off New Zealand. A group of scientists spent 21 days exploring South Island's waters last month. They found new species of mollusks, fish, and coral. The journey was led by Ocean Census, a nonprofit focused on discovering new ocean life, and 2 other institutions from New Zealand. Scientists estimate that 90% of ocean life is still undiscovered. Thanks for joining us for What's Up Taiwan. Download our app to get more of our stories on your phone. And before we sign off, take a look at the scene of hundreds of people in Buenos Aires paying tribute to the Japanese creator of Dragon Ball, Toriyama Akira, who died earlier this month. I'm Eric Gao. Take care, and I'll see you later.